try it. Okay.
Now it's taking.
Yeah. Okay, so I went through what we had done last time, and we had talked, or you had written about how your parents met, and you did descriptions of your parents and your siblings. And then on the audio tape, you talked about how you met Uncle Sam, and you talked about home life and your friends and trips you remember taking, and household appliances and gadgets. So that was great.
The old-fashioned things.
Yeah, yeah. So let's go. I want to know more about. Okay, tell me about your wedding day.
My wedding day.
Yeah. Did you have? Was it? Where was it?
Very small wedding. It was held at my mom and dad's house. We were married. As in the Jewish religion, they usually have what they call a chuppah, which is like a covering, and it has four corners, and on each corner is a pole of some kind to hold it up, and that takes four people to one on each corner to hold that above the bride and groom. And I don't know why they have that, whether it's I have no idea, but it's called a chuppah, and then the bride and groom are under that, and instead of us having one, are in that home on Greenwood. You're going to get a lot of stuttering on this. Had an archway between the living room and the middle room, and it was only about this wide, so we used that as the substitute. And Uncle Sam's brother stood for him. He was in the service, and he had his uniform on. We also didn't have movies or take pictures of it. And my girlfriend was my maid of honor. I mean, my best.
Which girl? Friend?
She passed away years ago. But I had known her from grade school. They lived a couple blocks away from me. And when I may have told you this, when she invited me over to her house to play after school one day, and took me up to her bedroom, and she had a 3-foot bookcase similar to the one I have over there against the wall, filled with books. And her and I used to go to the library every 2 weeks in those days, and we're allowed 2 books for 2 weeks. Now you can take out 6 or 7, and you can have them for a month or 2. But anyhow, we'd each take 2 books, and then we'd trade them after we finished, and we'd have 4 to read for every 2 weeks. And so I thought, here was this girlfriend from ordinary school, and she has a bookcase full of books. They must be rich. And I just reveled in that. So anyhow, and her daddy would take her to the library. I had been there one night, and she came in with her dad, and he brought her there because she had read all her books, and he liked for her to read. Her parents read. So that was the story from the book side. Now, where did I take a 10? Oh, as I say, she lived just about 2 blocks away from me on Reservoir Street. We lived on Greenwood, but we went to the same school. Her mother also was a very good cook, and when I grew older and had a job, worked, she would invite me on Sunday for dinner, and she always made homemade pies. Now, this is starting from my wedding, so that's the girl I had in mind to stand up,
And Uncle Sam's family was there, and your family was there.
And a couple aunts and uncles, and of course we didn't have any aunts and uncles because they didn't. My uncle in Michigan, who was already dead and already passed away, and he was the only one we had. And Mama's brother was. Olga was there, and I think Emily. But anyhow, one of the fun things happened. Uncle Huldy gave, and his wife gave Mom and Pop a mantle clock, really pretty, graceful thing. And they put her on top of they all had an at the piano in the middle room, and they put her on the back, you know. And sure enough, the wedding was supposed to be at 3 o'clock, and there we were, and all of a sudden it goes bong, bong, bong. Of course, I thought that was nice, because it signified it was time, you know, for the wedding and all that. But then after that was finished, we lived next to Hoppy's, and in summertime they had the jukebox. It was programmed to have the receiver and stuff outside. And they started playing that, and they play it real loud. And here we were with that playing, and Olga called them up, told them to play it, turn it down. And then, when it came time to the vows, Sam said his, and then it came time for me, and I got about 4 words out, and then I started choking up, and then I couldn't, and then, and I thought, good night, you know, how romantic is this?
Aw. You choked up because you were just in the moment and just...
Yeah, but I just was overwhelmed, I guess, you know, with the solemnity of the occasion and all those people around. It wasn't a big crowd, but it was more than ordinary.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had some kind of refreshments. I think we just had plain cake and ice cream. And then Olga wrote it right up. Then we left about 5 o'clock because we were going to Indiana for a state park for our honeymoon for a week. And we went to State Park because you didn't have much gas. The war was on. And so we had to plan how far we could go and come back in as much gas as we could get. And also the original state park was up farther north in Indiana, but it was supposed to be a nicer facility. And they were booked up, so we went to Turkey Run State Park, and that, I'm so glad we didn't get to go to the other one because it was farther away. And the next year we went back there for our anniversary, and they had excellent food. The kids, waitresses were from the high school, junior high, and real polite kids. And the food was excellent, and we had the facilities of nature trails. They had a naturalist there that took us on walks and stuff.
Nice.
And when we got there, it was dark and nighttime. We went to the hotel, and they had a cabin for us. The cabins were built so that they had an entrance on each side for each. See, there was a 4-way.
Okay.
And as we were waiting for the man to unlock the door and take us inside, the birds were going to sleep, and they were singing their evening song. It was real nice, you know, it was quiet, and here are these birds chirping and stuff. Of course, I don't have any. In those days, you didn't have that.
Right.
And if they had, we wouldn't have had one anyhow. So that was the wedding in the
What year was this?
1943,
43.
August 1st, 1943. You want more soup?
Sure.
And you ready for another bagel?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Why don't you, well, no, I'll serve this, and you can, I'll get your bagel ready. It's Dean Martin singing that.
Thank
I
you.
like, it's an Italian song. You know he was Italian.
Yeah.
And I like the way he sings it. he's one of the few singers, I call him in my era, that seem to enjoy singing. You know, Frank Sinatra, I liked him in the beginning, but afterwards I think he felt that he was so good, and he when he sang, he wanted to embellish it some way or other, instead of just being plain. So then I realized that Dean Martin, is that hot enough?
Yeah.
Okay. And Perry Como was another one who was of Italian extraction, and he also gave me the impression that he loved to sing. I liked his recordings. Okay, that takes care of the wedding. We
That
went on our
takes care.
honeymoon.
Yes, except I have a couple more questions about the wedding. What did you wear?
White, of course.
Was it a long?
No,
It was
because
just-
it was home,
Okay.
and it was a white two-piece suit-like.
Okay.
But it was very, it wasn't plain, like tailored. It wasn't a tailored suit. It had like some lace in the front and the body part, and it had short sleeves, but they were an indentation, and also the lace was around that. And it was a waffle weave pate is what it was. And my girlfriend was with me when I shopped for it.
Where did you buy it at?
We bought it in Cincinnati in the arcade, in the Netherland arcade. At one time there was this exclusive shop. I can't think of the name of it now, but as you walk in, it was to the right if you came in from that side. And we had shopped at Shillitoe's, which was the store then, and Pogues, and finally, in desperation, we decided to go here. And I thought, I won't be able to afford any of their clothes, but let's go. So sure enough, it was a beautiful suit, and I was, I guess the price was within my range, or else I was decided it was a special occasion and splurge low. And you know what? I only wore that about 3 times, and then a year later when I went to try it on, that jacket would not button.
Oh, really?
And I didn't get to wear it very much
Oh.
at all. It was so pretty.
Oh.
Even the skirt didn't fit anymore.
Do you still have it?
Mm-hmm.
Do you?
I think so. You know, sentimental.
Yeah.
Yeah. Someday when you come, I'll see it's in my cedar chest. And I have to take the one, let's see, is the cedar chest on top? I think it is. It won't be that. And then our wedding album is in the cedar chest.
Oh, so you do have pictures.
But just like maybe 3 or 4.
Oh.
I don't take a good picture because I'm not comfortable when I have my picture taken. Now, I think all the Durkle girls, they smile, and it's not a smile like that, you know, it's a smile that's really, it's a real genuine smile. And I don't know how they do it. I think it's great, because every time they take a picture.
Yeah, they always take good pictures.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so,
So someday when you come,
that'd be great. I'd love to see it.
okay, I'll get that out of my dress.
Yeah.
But I will put it on. Because if it didn't fit then, it's not going to fit now.
I bet it would fit you now. I bet it would fit you. You're so skinny. You don't think it'd fit you now?
When I was in high school, I was this high. Well, actually, I think I lost a ½ inch. And I weighed 93. When we were married, after I graduated, gradually each year, I gained a little more. And at one time, I guess when we were married, I must have weighed about 118, something like that. I was still skinny though.
Yeah.
Because I was 5'4"1/4. And anyhow, just gradually through the years, I guess because the dress was so special and so what I thought was not fancy, but you know, more not plain either. that I would only wear it on special occasions, which didn't come around very often. So that must be why suddenly it wouldn't fit. And of course I wouldn't give it to anybody because no one ever asked if they could borrow it. I don't know if someone had, would I have given it to them? I don't know. Because the sentimental value and the fact that I paid for it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I saved my dress, you know.
Sure.
I think every woman saves their dress.
I think so too. And then you think about maybe your daughter will wear it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that takes care of that. What's next?
Let's see. Now, do you remember what was your most memorable wedding gift?
Wow.
Or, you know.
I'm trying to think. I know what one I like the most, whether that's memorable.
Yeah, yeah.
Aunt Olga, my older sister, asked, she and Mama wanted to go together to buy me a gift. And she said, what would you like to have? Would you like us to buy something? Or would you like... Oh, I didn't give you a napkin. Oh, and I didn't... Oh, you baby, I bet you're supposed to... Here we go.
I'm sorry. I swallowed down the wrong pipe there.
Give me two.
Woo! I believe I did that.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, boy. Okay, so you...
What started was that I said Olga and said she and my mom were going together to buy something. And she wanted to know what I really would like to have, what I needed, and I said, yes, we don't have a floor lamp. And I said, I'd like, get a floor lamp that had like the three different rates.
Mm-hmm.
And so I picked it out and they bought it, and that was it.
Is it that one right there?
That's it.
All right.
And when we lived in an apartment, a furnished apartment, we lived in two different apartments at one time, two different times I should say. And something went wrong with it, and I was able to get a repairman who worked on it. He fixed it, and it's been okay ever since.
Wow.
Because we needed indirect lighting, and then we needed it so it was light enough so you could read. And because when you live in furnished apartments, they don't always have the kind of lamps you want and all that. So that's what I bought. But your grandma Emily didn't approve. She says, how come you told Alda what you wanted? And I said, she asked me. And she said, Mommy, we're going to go together and buy a room. I said, and they thought they ought to buy something that perhaps I like. And not that I'm that hard to please, but if you really know me, and Emily is way off, and so was Johnny, they'd spend so much money and be way off. And I feel so but not for this, because, you know, she had asked me, and I thought,
Right.
what's kind of dumb not to tell them if they ask you first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, that's the most memorable one. Oh, and a woman who was a friend of my mother's, she asked us to call her Aunt May. Her last name was Wiseman. I think they met at, my dad was a third-degree Mason, and Mama joined the Eastern Star. And she might have met her there. But she also worked at Dan Cohen's shoe store. And whenever we go downtown to shop or go to the market, she would often stop in Dan Cohen's, and if Aunt May wasn't busy, they would chat a while. And she also would invite Aunt May for dinner quite often. And so she asked us to call her Aunt May because she didn't want to be called. She knew we didn't have any aunts anymore, you know, the one that moved to Michigan. And I was kind of nice. We felt a little closer to her. Anyhow, she gave us a lace tablecloth, which was such a luxury gift, is what I want to say. Because we didn't even have the furniture to go with that lace, you know. Do you know I never used it?
Really?
Never, not once. Because I never ever had the occasion when then I could really set the table to fit that. I thought of using an lining it with a color, pink or blue or something, and using it as a bedspread.
Oh.
But it wasn't quite long enough, see. And so I thought, all right, so I just folded it up, put it in the drawer, and there it is. And so that was, you know, it was nice of her to think of it and want to give us something that was that special. We got towels, we got a lot of things that really we needed.
Right.
Pots and pans and towels. And
We got a lot of crystal and things that are very nice, but for everyday use, you know, what we really wanted, pots and pans, we didn't get. You know, isn't that funny how that is?
yeah, because the pots and pans, if you get stainless steel, they're expensive. But they're the best because I discovered myself with the pots and pans of aluminum. If you burn something, you can get it cleaned off. If it's now I said aluminum, I meant if it was stainless steel. I've burned several things pretty bad, and I'm able to clean them until they shine again. But you have to work at it. I get very aggravated when I do that. First time I did, I walked all around the house and I slammed the doors and called myself names and cussing. Oh, you're the damn dumbest person. I said,
Oh.
It took me like 3 or 4 days to get that cleaned off. Then I had an 80-year-old friend. We sewed together for Sisters of the Poor, and she invited me to her house for dinner, or lunch. And she said she had burned a pan, some food in the pan, and she said what you do is you put the cold water in the sink, and you immediately put on your hot gloves, you know, hot pads, and dip it right down into the cold. And she says the hot pan with the food in it, charred food, it will go sss. And she says then you can, and you leave it in there then, and then later on you can just sort of scoop it up somehow, and it cleans up much easier. And Sam said you can't do that, it'll split, you know, when you take hot metal and put it into cold. And I said apparently stainless steel doesn't, because she told me, and I tried it, and I've done it twice now. I'm the world's best burner ever. Okay, what else?
Okay.
That was wedding gifts.
Yes. And then, okay, what advice would you have about choosing a mate and getting married?
Choosing who?
Choosing a mate
Oh, a mate.
and getting married.
I thought you said choosing me and what?
And that kind of ties in with what's the key to selecting the right mate. So, advice and on selecting the right person.
I don't think anybody ever gave me any advice.
Really?
I don't think so.
Then how did you know Uncle Sam was the one?
I have no idea. I don't know.
Really?
Whether bells run, I don't think so. I was very practical. And he liked me.
Really?
I think. Because he always tells people it's the best thing he ever did. And I'm always, the first time he said, I was surprised because, that's quite, because we're not perfect. And a lot of dumb things. I also yell occasionally. My dermatologist, I got a dermatologist, and he sees Sam at the lawn when he used to go there. And he had said, he talked to me out there and so on and so forth. And by the way, I have more soup if you want more.
I'm good.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, he talks to him down there, and he said something about he likes to tease. And I said, yeah, he likes to tease. I think he does it because it's an icebreaker. So, and he said, what do you do when he gets a little touchy or stuff? And I said, he didn't say fight or argue or anything. He said, what do you do when he's such and such? And I said, well, I give it right back to him. And he says, oh, good for you. So, I would say probably 50-50. I don't think it wasn't like reading storybooks or like that, At least not for me. I think I'm too practical. Same way when people give me gifts and they mean well. If they knew me better, they'd know I'd rather have something very down to earth. Or a contribution to a charity is a good one because somebody benefits from it, and I am glad that they do. And then that person who gave it didn't go hunting for something. What does she like? What does she like?
Yeah.
What can I get her? Which is foolish. It's a waste of time to just, not to know some well enough to know what to get them. And my girlfriend that was in our wedding, for our first anniversary, she gave me she gave me the cookbook as one of the wedding presents. And then she wrote in there, I hope you get to use, this was, couldn't have been on the wedding. It must have been my birthday, which was maybe a year later. Anyhow, she wrote there, I hope you get to use this book before I use mine. And of course I did. We got married, but her boyfriend during the war was killed in Iwo Jima, so she didn't have a chance to use hers. But they always got along real well together. And she's the one whose mother used to always invite me, not always, would invite me a lot for Sunday dinner because they were English extraction and they believed in roast beef and Yorkshire pudding and all the works plus the dessert. And she made what they call 3-layer pies. She would have the crust on the bottom and then a layer of some kind of like a pudding in there, so let's say chocolate. The next one would be pie crust and then another layer and then it would be butterscotch and so on, third and so on. First time she served that when I was there, she said, what would you like? And she had made other pie too. And she said, which one would you prefer? And I just looked up at her and I said, could I have some of each, please? In a real little voice. And the whole family just roared because they knew I liked pie. I guess they were waiting to see which one I was going to do. And I couldn't decide, so I said, and she didn't. So every after that, whenever she made them, they knew that. And I just wanted a little piece, After all, 4 layers, that's, pretty many calories. Okay, now, are you watching the time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, you want just water with your dessert?
Yeah.
Okay. I might make my thingamajig. I'm going to reheat that, and then I'll be right back.
Okay.
Stupid one.
No, not at all. Not at all. I guess my question is, because you've been married for so many years, successfully married, and it's so rare, like, if you could tell, what's a piece of advice you would give about to someone getting married? Like, what's the secret, do you think, to a successful
I don't
marriage?
think there's a secret really, as much as I don't know whether I would give anybody advice, except what I've read through the years, and that a person, if you're having an argument or disagreement, you can't always be right, you know, and you have to try to see the other person's side, and hopefully they try to see yours. But one of the things I did read that was by a married couple said, whatever you do when you go to bed, don't go to bed angry.
Mm-hmm.
Make up before you go. And then I pattern my behavior on, or I sort of try to be like Sam's sister-in-law, who had married his older brother, who is very set in his ways and can be very opinionated and stubborn. And she was raised in a family that was raised with so much love in that family. You could tell when the sisters were together, there were 5 girls and 4 boys. They had 9 children. Her mother was a little tiny thing. And what was so interesting was, in those days, you thought when someone was proposed, received a proposal and accepted, that they would marry. Well, she was engaged to be married, and she met their father, and it was like that. You wouldn't think in those days, you know. And so she raised her children, and I don't know how she was raised, but whatever the person she was full of love and patience, and Dina is the same way. She doesn't have one favorite child. You cannot tell when they're all together. You cannot tell if she has a favorite child. She thinks they're all wonderful, and I think that's wonderful. Now she doesn't, by that I mean, she doesn't embellish so that to make them feel better. That's a waste, really, and a lie. It's a lie too. She just, whatever her husband does is fine. One time we were out, we used to go to Columbus, she and I, on the weekend, when her daughter moved back from California. She had 2 boys, she wanted to go to good schools, and she figured she had gone to High State. She liked the town. She was going to settle there and put the boys in the good schools, grade school, high school, and in college. And anyhow, her mother, when she came back then, she lived in a she lived in a house that she rented. And then after she had been there a couple years and had a good job, then she bought a house. And she would invite us once a summer to come for a long weekend. We'd leave here at 10, get up there by noon, have lunch, and then we'd leave Sunday noon. And she'd pack a lunch because we'd stop at the rest areas, on the way home. And because Dina didn't drive. But anyhow, one time when we were coming home, she said, what I wanted to point out was her daughter came down one weekend and we were talking out the kitchen. We always made tea and then sat around the kitchen table, and the men would be in the living room and we could say anything we wanted. And Dina says, we never had any trouble. She says, we always got along. We never fought. And Madeline says, of course you didn't. She says, there was no conflict. You see, whatever he said was okay with her.
And it truly was okay with her?
Yes, I can't believe it. Because, and then at one time on the way home, she says, I adore him. And I said, I thought you weren't supposed to adore anybody but God. Because he's a human being. And he is not perfect by a long shot. And I think he's very self-centered, and she spoils him. And whatever he does is okay. And if I married him, I'm not wrong. Yeah. So there you have a woman who, the way she was raised and her personality. She was the youngest in the family. You would think she'd be spoiled.
Mm-hmm.
But her closest friend was her sister, who was 2 years older than her, and they were inseparable. They would call after the sister's husband died, and she lived in an apartment. She would call Dina, and they would talk 2 or 3 times a day sometimes. And they would talk like an hour at a time, because they both had Cincinnati phones. So, and her kids always gave her really nice gifts. They got the Cincinnati phone so she could talk to her sisters as long as she wanted and as often as she wanted. And they paid the bills. And anyhow, they would talk, and Herman used to say, what do you find to talk about? Because he's the one, when you go into the thing, okay, we'll see you at such and such, bye-bye. And she says, I don't know, we just... so it gives you an idea how close they were. Their lives were similar, same parents, same family, and the boys were the older ones, the girls were like the younger ones. That's it. What else?
So, were your parents' marriage, was that a marriage that you could maybe, was that a good role model of a marriage? Is that what you thought marriage was?
No, that's not what I thought marriage was. My favorite quotation in the Bible is Matthew 7, chapter 7, verse 1. I'm going to let you go home and look it up.
I better, what is it again?
Matthew, chapter 7, verse 1. It's a very short verse. And it says, I should let you look it up, and you will, to make sure that I'm saying it right. Forgive, and see, I haven't quoted for so long, forgive. To forgive is not, I'm not saying it right, I can't get it out. Something about forgive. Or not to be, or, no, to judge. To judge. Judge not. That's it. Okay, I'm fine with it. Judge not, lest ye be not forgiven. So many people see don't get that not in there. I know because a friend that I worked with down at Fisher Body, very bright woman, went to college and a school teacher and decided she didn't want to do that anymore and went to work in the office. And she mentioned that one time, and I said, it says, judge not lest ye be not judged. And she said, oh no. And I said, yes it is. I said, well, you know why? Because to judge someone means you weigh everything, all the points and stuff, all qualities, everything. And to not be judged means they don't take into consideration all the things that they should. It's not really balanced. If you go ahead and judge someone and don't think, well, let's see that, and besides, you can't really judge someone because you don't know their innermost thoughts, why they do things, a certain thing, and so on and so forth. So that's my favorite quotation. And so I think that's what Dina does not do. She does not judge. And when she meets people, she's very sure of herself, but she's not pushy. In other words, she was raised and their neighbors, they were the only Jewish family in that whole neighborhood down in Covington. And they lived, the Catholic Church was a block away. The father lived behind, their backyards butted each other, so his home was there, and they talked, over the fence and stuff. And she said, and her playmates were all Catholic girls. But the thing she said was, those Catholic girls, they would say to Dina and her sisters, don't go on that side of the street because there's Protestants over there.
Oh.
She always thought that was funny, because here she was Jewish and these Catholic girls were her friends.
Oh, that's funny.
Yes, it is.
Oh. Well, the reason I asked that is because I'm reading a book right now on, it's called The Legacy of Divorce. And it's been insightful for me to read it because my parents divorced when I was 12. I really didn't have, I don't remember them together, even though I was 12. It's like from anything before that has just gone.
Mm-hmm.
But because when Leo and I took like marriage preparation classes, and one of the questions was, what is a marriage that your role model marriage? And for him, of course, was his parents, because they have a very, very great marriage. And for me, I had to rack my brain because I wasn't around one. But I spent so many summers out with Tina and Roger that I would have to say probably Tina and Roger. I said, and my grandparents and you and Uncle Sam have been married for so long. I said, probably those three. And because I would have to say that my parents' marriage is not one I would role model after, just because I don't remember it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I was wondering if your parents' marriage was one that, if you thought when you got married that that's how marriage would be, or
well, when I was younger, children under, unless they're very observant or very bright, let's just say that children under high school age are not as observant. My parents had arguments, and I think my mother, she was the youngest in her family, and I do believe she was spoiled. She's very pretty.
Your mother?
Yeah, that's her in that picture there.
Oh, okay.
And of course then she already had, she's about 25 there, and she already had a son. She had married, and her husband died of, at least her son said, that he had a ruptured appendix. In those days they couldn't do anything for him. And they were shortly married. They weren't married very long. She was either pregnant when he died, or the baby had been born and was 3 months old.
Okay.
One of the
Holding.
two. Mm-hmm,
Okay.
holding. And anyhow, I think my mother was in love with my father because they had 5 children, and I think one of the attributes they both had, one of them that he had that sort of drew her to him was the fact that he could sing, and she sang too, and they used to harmonize and sing. But he also liked to drink beer, and he would get intoxicated. And because she told me one time they went to a picnic before they were married. See, she came here to visit her brother and her uncle, and that's how she met my dad. And so they, I guess, would go on picnics often, and be drinking beer. And one time he got really drunk, and this man, one of them, I don't know if he was a relative or just one of the men there, and he says, "I'll take you home, Mama." And she said, "No, I came with him, and I'll go home with him." And she told me this a long time ago, and I said, "You know what, Mom?" I said, "If I went to a picnic with somebody, and he got drunk like that, and someone asked me to take me home, I said, either I would go home with him, or I would let him take me home, and I would never date him again.
Right.
I would never date him again." And she didn't say anything. But she, I think instead of discussing what bothered her, or when they had a disagreement, she would just go into a rage. And she would scream.
Really?
Oh yeah. And us kids, sometimes it often happened with the dining room table when we're eating, which is the worst time to have an argument. One time she got up, and Papa said, and our dining room windows faced the neighbors, and they had a porch, and they had a window and a door that went into their kitchen. And in summer, we all had the windows open, and he said, "Don't yell so loud." He said, "The neighbors are hearing you." And he was ashamed. And she says, she got up, she says, "I wanted to hear so we down over all the windows." That to me was like very childish.
Yeah.
I was now getting to be the age where I was beginning to observe, and it bothered me. She belittled him. I think as long as they sang the church choir and they worked on, as I say, Masons, Easter Stars. I don't know when. We always said it was changing life. We excused her, so she's having a change in life. I don't know if she did or not. She did go to the doctor regularly, and he was the Eagle doctor, and he would charge 50 cents, and that's all they could afford anyhow. But we would walk from our house clear across the river to his office and then back home again. But on the way home, she always managed to have a couple nickels, because this one Greek restaurant had ice cream in the parlor, like in the front, and she'd give us, Emily and I went with her, and sometimes my girlfriend Iris would go, and she'd give us each a nickel and say, "Go and get yourself a double dipper." They'd have a cone with 2 dips. So she would see that we got that, and it just bothered me.
Well, do you think she would go into those rages because she was maybe mad at him for drinking, or she was just?
Well, if he, but see, when we were home at the dinner table, no, he wasn't drunk then. When he'd go to a party, he just would be, he loved his beer, and when he came home from work at night, he'd go next door. He would go, or when the kids would go, with this bucket this big, this high, with a hand, and he'd say, "Go next door and get me a bucket of beer." And the two would sit at the dining room table and drink it. He would either read the paper, or they'd be discussing something, talking, or just sitting there silently drinking. I don't know. I didn't just, I didn't really take the time to observe so I could have more to judge by. And as I say, judge not unless you be not judged. But from her actions, she, there's a word they say, when a woman emasculates, another word, when they belittle a man and emasculate him, they take away his backbone. And he, rather than stand up to her, would let her rave and rant. And sometimes at the dinner table, she would criticize me, and that bothered me, because here he is working with, bringing his check home every week and giving her the money. And just silently taking it out. How does that make it his food? And he's eating. Shouldn't he be relaxed?
Yeah. Why didn't he ever challenge her?
Because he was in debt. That's the word. He'd rather be silent and have it quiet and have her finally stop than to stand up to her and say, because Mama trained us kids to do the housework. As all got bigger, a friend of my mama said she came over one day to visit, and Alder was out in the backyard of summertime, and Mama had this big, they used to have big galvanized tubs when they did laundry, 2 of them. I don't know if you ever saw any arrangement or anything, but it's on a stand and it holds 2 of them, and the machine is at the back, and you wring the clothes out, it goes into the first water, then you move this machine and the wringer, and then you rinse them up and down, and then you put it through it into the second water. The second water then is supposed to have all the soap out of it, then you hang them up and you wring them again. And she said, here was little Olga, not even 6 years old, she was out there. My dad had put a big cement patio out there because he had grapes and everything, and when he picked them, he didn't have to go on the dirt to get them all off. And here was little Olga, she says, scrubbing socks on a scrubber. And she said that she wasn't even 6 years old. She was surprised. And so I thought, then when John Hans came along, Mama would have him scrubbing the floors and mopping the floors. And so she trained us, and then as they got jobs, then the next one came. The only one who really didn't participate was Alvin. For some reason, when Papa had him cut the grass, his friend from across the street would come over, and Alvin would start, around, make a couple of rounds. Pretty soon, Alvin was gone, and the lawnmower was in the middle of the front yard, and the grass wasn't cut. Papa would get angry. And Emily always thought that, it's natural for a kid when a friend comes over that you go with them, even if you are in junior round. I disagree. I think a friend comes over and you talk and you go around and you can talk while you're cutting, and then you get your job done, and then you go with a fat friend. And Papa would get angry with him. Alvin said Papa used to give him whippings. And I said, I don't remember hearing him give me a whipping. He said, sure, he'd take me in the basement and he'd give me a whipping. And he said, not crying. I said, I don't remember. Now, I'm not saying he's lying. I'm just saying that it must not happen very often. And maybe I wasn't home sometimes. So I'm not sure exactly.
Well, if you guys were doing all the housework, what were your parents doing?
Well, on Saturdays, Mama would bake. Sometimes when we'd come home from school, we would clean on Fridays and get it over with. Because on Saturdays, Mom always she would bake German coffee cakes. She would make 7 and 8 of them out of this. She made a huge bowl of the dough. And then she would go on Saturday morning to town because they had this farmer's market around the courthouse, which they tried to start again, And the 2 youngest girls would go with her while Olga and Hans did the cleaning. Then when they got their jobs, already now we're in junior high, so we would come home from school and do our work so that we'd have Saturday free. Because Herdesy was under the same kind of German extraction where the kids graduate to do the work. But her mother also was a widow and she had to work 5 days a week in order to support the kids, the 2 girls. So there's a big difference.
Did your parents talk German to each other?
I think they did when we were little because when we grew up, I knew a lot more German than I did, as I got to high school. And that's why I took German again. I took it for 3 years. And then also, that was one reason. The other reason is because I knew it would be easy. It's my background. And when I had I had grades that I didn't qualify for being exempt from exams. In those days, if you made an average of 85, you didn't have to take any exams. They figured you'd gotten most of the credit and knowledge from your course, but not the whole thing. I didn't get that, but when I had my exam, I got 100, so I knew the essential things that she had on our tests, on the exam. And then also my second best subject. Now that was an easy one because of my background. The second best one was biology because everything just fit right in, and I made it 95 on that exam. So I thought that was pretty good. I say that.
Did you?
Well, sure. I only would come home. All Mom and Pop would want is that we made 70. You see, 70 was passing. If you made 70 or over, fine, they signed. So I always made 70 or 72, 75, something like that. Nothing very like her to see. She was always on the honor roll, and they parade them on assembly up on the stage and stuff. I don't know if they did that when you were in school. And I was always so proud that she was my best friend and her. She's always on the honor roll. Never once thinking, why don't you get it? You know?
Yeah.
Well, it turned out in all these years, she finally told me that she wasn't so smart as much as she knew how to study. And her teacher, she had Miss Jenkins in the 6th grade, she's a year behind me. And Miss Jenkins was an old maid lady, and she lived with her father. And Herdy said she taught them how to outline a chapter. And I said, well, she said she taught me as if she took her aside. Now, I don't know whether that happened or whether Herdy just followed what she did on the blackboard and then, maybe asked her questions later. I don't know. I remember her doing that, putting an outline, and then you'd say, this is the heading, and think of how boring. So that's the kind of student I was. And I wasn't learning. And then also, I didn't stop to think when math was my worst subject. And yet I have the German, or you might say Western European, German, Swiss mind that everything has to be just so. 2 and 2 is 4. And yet I didn't like arithmetic because I didn't know, and I never thought once to ask Hans or Aldo when I had, we'd have assignments, 4 or 5 questions to answer and figure out and take them in the next day. And I came home one day from school, grade school, and I had a nickel, and I went up to the store to get a nickel's worth of candy, and I had a little bag like that nickel. Now I'm going to do the first problem, and I'm going to work on it until I get it right. And then I'll need a piece of candy. Well, I would work and work and work, but I never got it. And I think, well, shoot, you worked hard. You deserve a piece of candy. The whole bag would be gone, and I wouldn't have any of the answers. And never once did I think, and Hans and Albert were good, we went to UC and took trigonometry and, calculus and all the things that they teach them now in school. And Albert was a bookkeeper. You can't keep books if you don't know something about figures.
Yeah.
And it never occurred. Now, if I were to go back again, I'd probably do the same thing, not knowing. But knowing now, I would ask questions and say, could you show me? Because I had another school chum whose neighbor said her brother was the coach of football and at Hammond High, and she said she would help me with my math. She didn't help me a bit because I didn't learn anything. It didn't cost me money or anything, but I wasn't getting something that would help me understand how to do arithmetic problems. That's a story. That's all. What's the time?
Okay. You've answered a lot just by talking, yeah.
I'm putting something else to sleep too, because she's sleeping that whole time.
I know. She's been out the whole time.
Yeah.
Well, you kind of answered one inadvertently. What people have you most admired in your life, and who's had the greatest influence on your life? It sounds like Dina would be one of those people.
And then I also had an affinity for liking to visit older people when I was younger. And they would often, we'd sit and they'd talk, and then, and I would absorb their knowledge, and they're from living longer. They weren't like, friends who were my age and stuff. But also Alma read a lot, and she was a good student. And so we used to, when I'd go to their house to sleep overnight, we'd sit up to 3 o'clock in the morning and talking about different things. And then we'd go to bed, and then we'd both get up the next morning and have to go to work, because we both had jobs. But we used to sit, and she did a lot of reading, so I assumed that maybe she had more knowledge about the world and stuff than I did. And the fact that her mother and father both read also, it's important. Now, my mom and dad may have read German books if they had them, I don't know. They had a German newspaper they got to read, whether it's every day or every weekly, I'm not sure. I think it was called Pittsburgh or something or other. But I never saw them sit and read a book. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
And I love to read. That was my favorite thing to do. And when I hear parents who don't read to their young children, preschoolers, I'm thinking, what a terrible waste, because that's your first chance.
Oh, yeah.
It's your first chance to get, to open up the world to you, in a safe way. Now, if your parents are pill poppers and those kind of, or alcoholics, I don't think that's a role model. In fact, and then again, maybe it is in an adverse way. I'm not going to be like them. That would be positive. But they would be missing the, the part of being in a family, the warmth and the closeness. I feel real sorry for kids that have parents that, are out on drugs and stuff.
Yeah.
They have to spend their money for that stuff. And I feel so sorry for the children. It must be horrible. So I don't think when compared to that now, mine was so bad, but nevertheless it did, I would say, singed me a little bit. It may not scarred me, but it singed me, to learn something from it. And then I did have 2 friends. My girlfriend's mother, she was 20 years older than me. And after I got to be 50 and she was 70, we were more like friends.
Right.
And she lived to be, when she was 95, she had a stroke and had to go to a nursing home, and she lived to be 100. And she had a stroke and couldn't talk very well, so he didn't enjoy going to visit her because she tried to talk and she had to repeat it, and she'd get exasperated and so on. But she watched the television, she read the paper, she could, her mind wasn't completely gone. They just didn't take the time to teach her how. See, that's what they do now when you have a stroke. They teach them and give them therapy. And pretty soon they can use their arms and legs and speak well. And then the other lady that I went with that was so good, the Sisters of the Poor, she was Catholic. My girlfriend was Episcopalian, and that's practically Catholic. She didn't have children, but they adopted his nephew and raised him. So you might say she had a juvenile in the home and through high school. But she was sensible, and she worked for her church and had the Women's Guild, and she went there to their meetings every week, and she would make pillows for when they had their socials to make extra money. You know how the Women's Guild does. They always worked to help raise money for the church. And she was forever doing it, and she was a real fast worker. Now that didn't rub off on me because I'm slow. And so she lived in the block where my mother's brother and her uncle lived, in that same block on Britannia. Would you believe that? And she told me things that when they lived there, she was adopted by her mother died when she was real young. It was friend who lived across the street adopted her, so she was raised by this couple. And one of the cute things she told me was her mother, her adopted mother, after dinner, she said, "You wash the dishes now, and I'm going to weed the garden, the vegetables." And so Alma, her name had to be Alma too. She washed the dishes and came out, and she said she was finished, and her mother said, "Well, now you can help me weed the garden." And she said, "Well, I forgot I had homework." And she said, "Okay, you go in and do your homework, and then you come out." So she went in and came out later. I did my homework, and her mother went in, and she said, "No, you did not. You have to come out anyhow, and then you do your homework later." So she was, disciplined too, in a nice way. To paddle doesn't do any good. And she had so many stories. She told me when she lived there then after they adopted her, and she was going into junior high. She went to St. Peter's School then, and they didn't have any sidewalks in that block. It was just one block beyond where the sidewalks ended. They didn't have any street lights. First they got street lights, and they were allowed to play after dark, because when it got dark, the mothers all called them in. And now they could play, they played all kinds of kickball and stuff like that. Then they got their sidewalks, and they all were able to skate. They had skates, but they had to go to the next block. Now they could skate up and down. And it was kind of cute, because she also knew my mom's uncle and his wife. And we used to go visit on Sunday after church. Mom and Emily and I would go over there to, let's see, what was it, Tom DeGraff. He was a milkman. He would sit, and this lady told me he would carry the milk in a bucket, and he'd go around and sell it by the quart. And I thought, boy, how primitive that was. That was a long time ago. Now, when we went, we'd walk over from our house, clear over to the Black Street Bridge, up the hill of Champion, all the way down to Britannia, and go all the way down to the very last block in Britannia. And sometime if you're in that neighborhood, it's a one-way street, by the way, and it goes from Ray Avenue down to where you turn the corner and you're on Haldeman, and it goes past the hospital. Well, that whole block then was where they lived, and she knew. She said she used to go on Sunday afternoon and visit Tom DeGraff. And I said, well then, she didn't go that often, but I said, I don't remember seeing you there, but I went to, at the, on 2nd Street where they had that veterans place, United Sam, what's the name of that place on 2nd Street across from the YM? That veterans.
American Legion?
Yeah, American Legion. My girlfriend Alma's friend, her mother, was going there with a couple ladies to play cards. They were having a social to play cards to raise money. And she said, "Would you like to go with us? We're planning to play such and such." And I said, "Yeah, I'd like to go." So I went. And this is either before we were married or after. I'm not really sure about that. But anyhow, I was sitting there, and before it started, where people were all talking and everything, and I look over and I see this woman, and I'm thinking, she looks familiar. And I keep looking at her, and I'm thinking, real funny feeling, Yeah, I know her. Where do I know her from? I don't know. Kept looking. Well, it turned out to be Alma that lived on Britannia Avenue, because she wore her hair real short, like a boyish bob. And when she was married, she had long hair. Through the years, I guess, when it got hot, maybe they decided to cut their hair. And she wore it in a boyish bob, and that's what I finally decided. That's where I saw her. She came to Tom Murray's, Tom DeGraff, we call him, not Tom Murray. That's Mama's sister-in-law. That's her brother's wife. She would come there, and then maybe she'd just drop in for 5-10 minutes. Not long enough for you to remember that you saw her there, that I saw her there. And it was interesting because then she told me so many of these stories then that when I said that, and my mother's brother lived down the street. He was a coppersmith. And then I said they moved to Michigan because he wanted to build a copper manufacturing. Start out with small and get bigger because he was supposed to be good at his trade. And they went up there, and then pretty soon his two sons were helping him. And he, unfortunately, was an alcoholic. And Mama never ever once mentioned that he was an alcoholic. It was always that they couldn't afford to put him in a real hospital, so they had to put him in a poorhouse hospital where he would get attention and his medication, but that's about all, and they could visit him. And anyhow, because of his alcoholism, and his two oldest sons helped him, Tanamari, his wife, said they would get telephone calls and ask him where the order was, and it wasn't complete, or she'd have to lie and say, it's almost ready, we'll have it in such and such, and the boys would work on it, but after a while they couldn't do that either, and they lost the whole machine shop and everything. And that in itself, I imagine, kept him as an alcoholic, because here he had this potential of getting rich. Yeah. And he lost it. And he was his wife was not, she was a role model, because she raised 9 kids by herself. And when Olga and I went up there one summer to visit, we had to go on the train. And she baked bread on Saturday morning. Her youngest, Donnie, he was crawling age. And I was playing on the floor, and he came over and bit me on the shoulder. Oh. And I cried, of course. I was 6 years old, going into 1st grade. And I cried, and she came over, and she took care. She lifted him up and everything, and she gave me some stuff to put on it and everything. And she was very patient, and raised those kids, and they were all turned out to be good kids. Not one turned out to be an alcoholic, which is unusual.
These are your cousins.
Yeah.
Do you keep in touch with them?
Just the one that's my age, and that's when we went up there to visit Olga and I. We came home, and then the next year, I was like 6 years old, and I came home late because my 1st grade teacher was angry with me. She said, you missed important things. How can how am I supposed to know? I should have been back in time. But I was always I was inhibited all when I was young. Always. I was afraid of strangers. I could not relate to people and talk right away. Very. Now Dina is like that. And she thinks everybody's very nice. She meets someone, they're really nice. She's really nice. And even Bessie, Sam's brother's wife, says Dina never has met someone she never liked. She always found. And then when she goes, say, to services or something afterwards, and you go downstairs for a social hall, she will be talking to all these people, and very relaxed and courteous and interesting, And I listen to her and I marvel, and I just stand there next to her because I think it must be the background. Yeah. And Hans now is the same as I am. He was always like a kind of not outgoing. And Emily and Alvin were similar in that they, when Alvin worked part-time after in junior high with my dad, and it meant as a mower, he didn't like that job. They needed the money. And Mr. Renshaw would come in and talk to them, and Alvin was a kind, and so is Emily. They smart talk back. And people like that when you're wealthy or good businessman, the head of a big organization, as Mr. Winchell was. And people give the impression that, they're not impressed with me. They're on an equal level. They come back for more because they like you. It's nice to talk to people. Well, Lord, I never would think of saying some of the things they'd say. And so you never ever break the ice. Fortunately, when I worked at Hamilton Foundry, during the war, with conscription, most places hired young boys to work. And Hamilton Foundry was the worst one of all. They only had one woman. She was an older spinster, and she was secretary to both owners. And the switchboard was run by a young man, and he went first in conscription, and they hired a young girl from Notre Dame in high school for girls. And then I was the second one. And then because Kathleen managed the switchboard, sometimes I'd have to take messages up there from my boss. She was busy, and when she wasn't busy, she would talk. She was very friendly. Well, she was friendly. And finally, the ice broke, and then we got together, and now she's one of my best friends. And what's nice about her is she has a wonderful sense of humor and a good outlook. She's a Catholic girl, and a good outlook on life. And to show you how strong she is and how much faith she has in God. I get so emotional. She lost 3 boys. She had 5 children. Turn that off. Just